Chester McDuffie built the first suit using ball bearings as the means of supplying motion to a joint in 1914. The suit was put to the test in 214 feet of water in New York. The development of personal diving suits in the early 1700s made it possible to explore the ocean's depths with more sophistication. Diving suits were first developed to support salvage operations, as many ships carrying valuables were lost to the ocean during dangerous expeditions. The earliest diving suits were designed in the 1710s, and the first fully enclosed suit was made in 1715 by English inventor John Lethbridge. It had a viewing hole, pressurized air-filled barrel, and watertight sleeves. The Berlin Wall, also called the Berliner Mauer in German, was a physical barrier that divided East Germany from West Berlin when it was built on August 13, 1961, in the dead of night. It was intended to prevent disgruntled East Germans from leaving for the West. The Berlin Wall was created almost as quickly as it was destroyed, falling on November 9, 1989. The Berlin Wall served as a representation of the Iron Curtain and the Cold War between Soviet-led communism and Western democracy for 28 years. Everywhere in the world rejoiced as it fell. Millions of fighters and bystanders lost their lives in World War I, and innumerable warriors were maimed and disfigured. Facial injuries were perhaps the most depressing since the soldiers had to cope with both the ongoing psychological stress and the physical loss. These men were anxious about their return home, not so much about the reactions of outsiders as about the treatment they would receive from friends and relatives. While many had injuries beyond the scope of surgery, others had access to skin grafting and surgery. These poor troops resorted to using picture masks. Portrait masks were first created by an English sculptor. They were painted in oils to match the patient's previous features and based on pre-injury photos. Wing walking was the practice of traveling along a biplane's wings while it was in flight, and it originated as a risky trick in aerial exhibitions of the 1920s. Beginning as a demonstration of the balance and stability of the planes, it progressed to in-the-air mechanical modifications and fixes, and finally to stunts during aerial barnstorming performances circa 1920. These aerial artists would try increasingly challenging acrobatics like handstands, hanging by one's teeth, and shifting from one aircraft to another as the routines grew more intricate. The old wing walkers would acknowledge, sometimes with pride, that the purpose of their performances was to profit off the audience's potential to witness a death. The rubber tire manufacturing company Michelin recently introduced a brand new hour of entertainment to the country's radio listeners with the launch of Michelin Hour. As shown above, the symphony musicians are dressed in strange ways. 1928. Heimwehr, prepared and versatile. Vienna, Austria. All of Vienna's Heimwehr personnel have been called into action and told to prepare for immediate deployment. The main streets are patrolled by armored vehicles in case of unrest. 1934. About 10 people were seen dangerously picnicking or camping close to the Palouse River Canyon in Washington state, along with 3 cars from the late 1920s. On March 28, 1957, James A. Craig, an engineer at Dumont, shows viewers how to operate a fully automated, dial-direct, transportable two-way radio telephone system. The system, which is now in operation by Richmond Radio Telephone Service, Inc., is the first radio telephone apparatus that permits calls to and from cars to be transmitted through local phone companies entirely unattended. It is made by Allen B. Dumont Laboratories, Inc. On January 10, 1946, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, an Army Sikorsky R-5 helicopter undertaking record trials shows off its lifting capability by hoisting 17 people and the pilot into the air while female spectators wave. Records for altitude, speed, and speed with payload were made during the testing. Commander Richard Byrd, during his flight from Spitsbergen over the North Pole and back, using a specially made leather helmet and mask. Using a Fokker plane, Commander Byrd and pilot Floyd Bennett completed the 1,360-mile journey in little over 15 hours. The reason behind hospital housekeeper Harriet Cole's decision to give her corpse to science remains a mystery. However, the effects of her nerve system donation are still being felt today. Dr. Rufus B. Weaver accomplished an incredible feat after Cole's death in 1888. He extracted and maintained a full nerve system. After 6 months of painstaking labor, he completed it, and it is now both a valuable instructional tool and an impressive sight for prospective physicians. Only 3 attempts at accomplishing this feat have been successful since then. The innermost chamber of King Tutankhamun's tomb was initially opened by English archaeologist Howard Carter shortly after it was discovered in 1922, close to Luxor, Egypt. The monowheel, often called a monocycle, was often proposed as a major new mode of transportation between the 1860s and the 1930s. The basic idea behind all the variations of the monowheel, many electric, some powered by humans and some utilizing gas motors, is that the driver sits inside a smaller inner ring that presses against the main outer wheel, allowing the vehicle to roll forward while the driver stays level. In 1895, a train crashes through the station wall and onto the street below Paris's Montparnasse station, after entering the station too quickly and failing to halt. Albina Mali-Hocevar, a Slovenian, joined the PLM in 1941 when she was 16 years old. When she was 17, she suffered 2 wounds while fighting opposition. She was employed as a nurse throughout the duration of the conflict. Photographed on June 20, 1969, a man on the moon shows astronaut Buzz Aldrin walking over the lunar surface for the first time. A man on the moon has become immortalized because to all those pictures. Aldrin is seen standing by himself, with nothing but the moon's immense expanse serving as his background. Aldrin is engulfed by the vast unknown of space, taking advantage of the feelings of curiosity and loneliness that still motivate humans to search for life beyond Earth's boundaries. There is not a trace of humanity around him. The fact that he is the only person in the picture further emphasizes the expedition's main theme, that a man has touched down on the moon. The United States forces unleashed an even more potent weapon on Nagasaki, known as Fat Man, 3 days after an atomic bomb known as Little Boy destroyed Hiroshima, Japan. A column of radioactive dust and debris rising to a height of 45,000 feet was created by the explosion. One of the approximately 500,000 Jews crammed into the Warsaw Ghetto, a neighborhood turned into a walled compound of agonizing famine and death by the Nazis, was the scared little kid in the image's center, raising his hands in terror. The German occupants began transferring over 5,000 Warsaw residents per day to detention camps in July 1942. Situated 760 miles south of Tokyo, the volcanic pile that obstructed the Allies' advance on Japan is really a tiny island. The Japanese had dug in, and the Americans required Iwo Jima as an airbase. After landing on February 19, 1945, American forces engaged in combat for a month, during which time 6,800 Americans and 21,000 Japanese were killed. Mount Suribachi was taken by the Marines on the 6th day of fighting. A larger American flag was soon flown, partly as a show of support for his troops and partly as a means of disheartening his adversaries. The Olympics honor the finest qualities of humanity, and Germany accepted the Games in 1972 to promote its athletes, highlight its democracy, and erase the memory of Adolf Hitler's 1936 Games. Sadly, this made it simple for 8 terrorists from the Palestinian organization Black September to raid the Munich Olympic Village, which houses the Israeli Olympians, on September 5th. Equipped with assault guns and grenades, the terrorists murdered 2 members of the team, kidnapped 9 others, and demanded the release of 234 of their fellow countrymen who were detained. Of the American corpsmen, removing a wounded child from the Hue combat is a unique opportunity to demonstrate the genuine worth of compassion and human dignity. The previous night, the boy was discovered roaming between the firing lines of the North Vietnamese and the Americans. Most likely, his parents had been murdered. Under the light of candles, they cleaned up the boy and bandaged his wounds before taking him into a bunker. Suddenly, these tough Marines turned into the kindest, most compassionate people.